You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for what is the final, and I do mean final, because this is a series finale that we just watched on Andor. That's right, episodes 10 through 12 didn't just end season 2, it actually ends the entire show. So, this is literally the last time, unless, of course, we do like some sort of Andor retrospective or something, you know, at some point in the future. This is the last time we do it, and of course, as always, we are joined by our good friend Universal. Says good evening, gentlemen, and of course, Ted Adam Green. Happy Star Wars Day, gang.
Hey.
So you know, it's good that we got some people on. It's good that we're actually. I mean, I hate to actually put it out there like this, but we're on time today. Like everything just fired up and worked as it has for the past, I don't know how many years we've been doing this, but we've been doing this a while, and everything's working the way it always has. That's good. That's always good news.
Indeed.
So yeah, I mean, you know what? I gotta say, the one thing, and there's been a couple other reviews that have basically alluded to this, but the one thing that I thought after I watched these episodes, it's going to be really hard to go back to the Dave Filoni-led stuff again. It really is. You know, once you've gotten Star Wars that's this quality of television, it's really going to be hard unless, of course, the television shows start to come up a little. And, of course, we'll have the movies. I mean, there is that. But I don't know, man. It's going to be tough to go back to that after this phenomenal ending that we had with all the nuances.
Unless Tony Gilroy decides he wants to do a director on the show.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is, you're right, there is always that. I mean, he could either direct another show, or, you know, if he makes another movie. Like, at this point, I would be happy if at least the movies ended up being this quality again, right? Because, I mean, honestly, the Star Wars, most of the television shows, and again, you know, we're not talking about The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian was, for what it was, I mean, The Mandalorian's not even this good, but for what it was really high level, you know, but yeah, I mean, unless you get something like that, I don't know. I mean, on one hand, it really sets a high bar for what Star Wars can and actually should be on television. But on the other hand, it really could create a disappointment because, you know, what are they going to follow this up with? Ahsoka Season 2?
That's what's next on the docket, I think.
Television-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you know, no offense, but Ahsoka Season 1 wasn't like... I mean, and again, we were excited for that. You know, we were really pumped up for Ahsoka Season 1. I mean, we both thought that Ahsoka Season 1 was going to be incredible. The trailer got us excited and everything. And it was funny because I remember when we first heard there was going to be an Andor series. And at first we were like, I don't know. And then obviously once they said, no, this is going to be kind of like a political thriller, you and I immediately went to the novel Bloodline and said, oh, well, all right, if they do something like that, it could work, which it did. And then, of course, Season 1, and I think even in some ways more so Season 2, although I like the way that Season 2 was formatted a lot better, but there was almost less action and more character development in Season 2 than there was even in Season 1. So I think a lot of the people that were expecting like the high action, lightsabers and blasters blazing, you know, that kind of thing, might have been a little bit disappointed at the more cerebral nature of this. And then there's some other people that I talked to as well that overall, you know, they're just kind of like, okay, I'm watching it and it's good, but I'm not hooked. And I think that it really just depends on where it lands with you because, you know, as you and I have talked about a million times, I I mean, there's just so much richness in this show that if you really get into the spirit of it, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people might have different, views. Some people still might feel like it was too slow. I mean, not these last 3 episodes. I don't think they would say that, um, but I can understand them being slow in some parts. Some parts may have been a little bit confusing at times, just because of the way things were happening and were playing out. But and I get it. People want the action. People want to be, have those moments. And I think this is about the build up. It's getting to the point. And some people were just kind of conditioned just not to, they want their dessert right now, and they don't want to wait for it. So it depends.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that was one of the complaints even with Rogue One, right? That a lot of people felt like Rogue One, although a really good movie, didn't feel like Star Wars necessarily to them. And, my whole thing is like, in some ways, it actually feels more like the original trilogy to me than a lot of the sequel trilogy movies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and plus I like it because it's a little less cartoony. I mean, people forget that if you go back and watch the original trilogy, there's a lot of slow parts in that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not all action. I mean, you look at A New Hope. A New Hope has got a lot of parts that, by today's filmmaking standards, completely drag.
Well, yeah, I think if you really, the action really doesn't hit until you get on the Death Star.
That's the main
really
thing.
start.
Sure, you get a little bit in the beginning, right? And then there's, like, all these lulls, and, I mean, you get like mild action in the cantina, I guess. But yeah, exactly. Really, it doesn't really start to ramp up until the Death Star, and then of course the attack on the Death Star was like,
right.
yeah, kind of like the big crescendo or whatever, So yeah, everybody forgets. Same thing with Empire. Empire probably arguably had more action than A New Hope did, but there's still a lot of all the Yoda Luke scenes. I mean, they're really, people I think forget sometimes that I think they're so conditioned to, number one, the way movies are made today, where it's just nonstop, every scene. It's almost like YouTube movies. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
And they're kind of spoiled by the prequels.
Yeah, you know what? You got a point. I was always going to the more modern stuff, but you're right. The prequels, yeah.
Yeah, the prequels kind of set up that, I think they kind of redefined Star Wars in a way where the lightsaber battles way more faster paced. You get way more, different types of force powers. You got all these massive battles where you got these clone troopers and droids, and things are blowing up, and you got these gladiator scenes, these animals that are like crazy. You know what I mean? So, and then of course you got this whole love story that's going. I mean, so you have a whole lot of going on in these movies. It's talking about the prequel trilogy. That I think that's where everybody kind of thinks Star Wars was going to continue, and then they decided to kind of bring it back to its roots. And I don't think people were ready for that.
All right, and so now, we also have David joining us a little earlier than usual.
Waiting.
Yep, it's Star Wars Day, and I watched Andor Season 2, so I'm ready. All right, well, good.
And he's actually watched Andor. No, I'm sorry, not Andor, Rogue One.
I was about to, I was like, that's what you just said.
Yeah. Sorry.
Wait, he hadn't seen Rogue One?
Mm-mm.
Oh, well, see, now that's a big part of why he probably didn't like Andor Season 1 then. Like, that whole time that we were reviewing Season 1, I thought he had seen Rogue One.
No.
Now a lot of the comments make a little bit more sense, because if you go into Andor and you haven't even seen Rogue One, oh, you're going to be completely lost, number one.
Yep.
Because, I mean, I guess it stands alone on its own, but I mean, it does greatly help if you had seen Rogue One before, It's almost
The
like that
context.
same. Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, because it's that age-old debate, right? What order should you watch the films in? Do you start with
Mm-hmm.
episode 1, which is more chronological, or do you start with episode 4, which is more the release order?
Order.
And people usually universally agree, go 4 through 6, 1 through 3. I mean, you could maybe almost do like Solo and Rogue One and then the original trilogy, but I think it helps if you watch the original trilogy first. So yeah, absolutely. If you hadn't, well, that just puts all of last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah,
When did we
into
get? 2
perspective.
years ago. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that once again, I think the way that they laid this out, because again, one of the things that I've been saying the whole time is how they've given us these little trilogies, each one, and there's a year in between them. So it's like before the Battle of Yavin, okay, this is 4 years before, 3 years, 2 years. Now we're at 1 year. And just the way they've handled a lot of the character development, too, because a lot of episode 10 focused, obviously, on Luthen. Before he changed his name, from Lear to Rail, which I think he just reversed the letters, to be honest, when you see that. But, kind of going back to when him and Clea were, when he found her and he was a sergeant and he sort of defected. And then it was given a lot of Luthen's backstory, because that was one of the things that we had wondered, I remember in season 1 even, was, all right, well, who is this guy and how did he rise to such prominence? And I also think that these trilogy of episodes, besides you get that, of course, episode 11, you get a little bit of, Dedra's thing and sort of her fall. And, it's a pretty good, like, middle act, I think, before, of course, we get to the season and what ends up being the series finale, which is, how the rebellion starts to unite. Obviously, Cassian has to make some choices. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things in there. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting through this whole thing is, to me, it really sheds a lot more light on how the rebellion went from being this splintered, all these different factions, to not only how it became united, but also, I think even more importantly, like the issues and how they work some of that out. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways from these the last few episodes are, and kind of this whole season, is the growth and development of these characters, seeing them come into their own, and understanding the gravity and the weight that they carry, and it sets up everything for Rogue One. It makes you understand Rogue One a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, I was really shocked. I was shocked by how much it really affected Rogue One. I mean, I would
Oh yeah,
actually venture to say that this season affects Rogue One as much as Rogue One affects A New Hope.
yeah,
Like, when I go back and watch Rogue One, which I fully intend to do, it's going to actually change it. It's going to be it's going to be a different experience. Very similar to what I always said Catalyst did.
right. I was about to say, like, with Catalyst. Yep.
Yeah,
This is like,
Catalyst did that
yep.
too, but I mean, this does it in a different way, and probably because Catalyst sticks with, well, it does time jump a little bit, but Catalyst really focuses more on Galen and Krennic and sort of how they went from being like really close friends to how that splinter. I mean, that's really the focal point of Catalyst, and pretty much giving you the prequel. Now, it'll be interesting. I would almost like to reread, or at least reread, about Catalyst in light of some of the information that they give you, particularly in these 3 episodes that we're reviewing today, because, there's a lot of things that, I mean, they almost had to be very careful bumping up against Rogue One the way they do, because it literally ends very much the way Rogue One ends, where the last scene of Rogue One is could be butted right up against the first scene in A New Hope. I mean, Cassian is basically going off to meet that spy that we first see him meeting in Rogue One. So I mean, it wasn't like, oh, it happened a few days before. I mean, nah, it's literally like, you know,
I just landed my shit. Like, this happened 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, minus the travel time, I guess you can make that argument. But yeah, I mean, at least story-wise, it's like, yep, he's going off, you know, to do that.
So, I'm going to ask you this. So, looking at Luthen, for example, like, you know, he had a lot of, we talked about the weight, the gravity of some of these characters, right? So you have Luthen, you have Kalea. What do you think about that arc, those characters?
Well, I mean, I thought it was actually a really, like, it went a lot deeper than I expected, because obviously we didn't really understand their relationship that much in season 1 or even the beginning of season 2. You know, it's almost a shame that they waited this long to give you that, honestly. But there's a lot of things that tied into it. I mean, I forgot the like the guy that Luthen ended up meeting, the guy that had been sort of a spy for them the whole time.
Oh,
you know, where he kept saying, you know, you got to get me out of here.
Yeah.
Guy's been around since. Yeah. Well, I remember the scene in season 1, you know, where Luthen was just like, you know, I'm essentially, I forgot the exact lines, but he was talking about how he's given up everything for the rebellion. You know, I think he had a line something like, you know, I'm fighting for a sunrise or I'm never going to see, or something to that effect. I don't remember the exact line. Obviously, I haven't seen season 1 in a while. I should have rewatched it probably before this, but I didn't. But the thing is, he was trying to convey to that guy when he was trying to get him to spy for him that, listen, you know, we all, because remember, that guy was like, well, I have a wife and kid, you know, I don't. And Luthen's like, look, this is the right thing to do. We all have something to lose. Well, this is giving you the culmination of that, because Luthen knows he's not going to get out of this. You know, I love the line when Dedra comes to, you know, meet him, and at first it's sort of a little bit of a pretense, right? Like, I'm going to, and, you know, he says something like that there's 2 forgeries, you know, in here or whatever. Well, he's talking about him and Dedra. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things about Luthen that we've gotten hints about Luthen's motives and everything else, but I don't know. I honestly think that ultimately we learned so much about Luthen and his motivations. I kind of wish we had done that later. Now, David, this is kind of funny. I think I might have to explain this for Universal. So first, David says, I'm sure the suspense is killing you. Are you ready for this bomb to drop? And then, of course, Universal says, bomb? So for those of our new subscribers who don't know, so David's been, he's one of Daryl's friends. He actually, he supported the channel, became, you know, our only paying member, actually, for a while. So he even co-hosted the Thanksgiving special with us. So if you guys want to, you know, really see in context, go back to that. But the context for this is, when we reviewed season 1, most of our episodes, most of our reviews ended up being pretty much these debates and arguments between Daryl and I and David. Like, it was just, David hated it, couldn't stand it, couldn't understand it, and it just, you know, we're trying to explain the nuances. Of course, David's a newer Star Wars fan too, so you have to factor that in. So yeah. You know, it's one of those things. All right.
Somewhat scathing opinion of Andor.
Yeah, now Universal also chips in on a previous comment. That's why I want to keep up with these chats, actually. He says, I burned my life to make a sunrise that I'll know I'll never see. Thank you. That was the line. All right, so now David, of course, changes his tune. He says, I loved it. In all caps, even. Wow, all right. Best show they have. I loved everything about it. The acting, the cinematography, creativity, the writing, everything. I have friends everywhere. Of course, you know, Ted's very happy about that. Universal not really fully in the grasp of this is saying, David, awesome to hear you enjoyed it. David, it's I mean, this is like second only to maybe I mean, this is an amazing thing.
Monumental occasion.
Yes, but now
have some champagne poured at this point.
But the big question though becomes mostly to David here is now, does it actually put season 1 in a little bit of a different light? Understanding, because again, the Rogue One thing is a big thing. Like, if I had known that at the time that we were, that's probably the first thing I would have said.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're coming into Star Wars and you've only, maybe seen like the original trilogy or something, and then suddenly you're watching Andor, you're going to be like, well, what's this? I thought I was watching Star Wars. Right? And, you and I, of course, and many others like us have had a lot of we've had decades of consuming this stuff.
Yep.
So by the time Rogue One, and in particular, by the time Andor comes around, we're ready for something like this, right? Like, we're looking at it in a different way, where I think if somebody is coming in, I mean, and I mentioned this on last week's review, by the way, and that is, and this is kind of an important one. I mentioned on last week's review that it's interesting because people will say that Andor is the thing that you want to introduce to non-Star Wars fans in order to get them engaged in Star Wars, right? Now, that's true, but the part that they're leaving out is it has to be the kind of Star Wars fan that doesn't really enjoy the typical Star Wars thing. That's when showing them something like Andor is going to work. If you show somebody who's really deep into the sci-fi fantasy part of it, and you start showing them Andor, that might, without the benefit of all the lore, all of the, just pretty much all the material, because that's when you can slot Andor into its proper spot. Because yes, the fact of the matter is, we've been saying it, and hopefully David now can understand what we've been talking about, because it's like there's a lot of nuances. I think that if I was going to choose one word to describe Andor, it's very nuanced. It's not a surface level thing at all.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Yeah, if you're looking for the lore, of the Jedi, the Sith, the Force, the lightsabers,
right?
If you're looking for that, if you're looking for, the, do or do not, there is no try, stuff. If you're looking for the space battles per se, Andor is probably not going to appeal that much to you. If you and that's why we always say there's a difference between the war and the lore.
Yeah.
So Andor is giving you the war part. It's showing you why the lore is so important, because you have the backdrop of a war that's taking place. And once you understand the gravity and the severity of the war and how it's affecting everyday people, you need a hero like a Luke Skywalker. You need a hero like Han Solo. You need people like Princess Leia to lead the charge to stop this war, because this is how it's affecting everyday people. And so it's kind of like, don't want to sound like that guy or preaching, because I'm like, but it's kind of like when you look back at the civil rights movement, you have all this stuff going on in the country, and everyone's like, okay, what are we doing? You need a Dr. Martin Luther King. You need a Malcolm X. You need a Rosa Parks. You need these heroes to rise above everyone else, who are the common people, but they've taken themselves and put themselves in harm's way to deal with the ideology of racism, right? So that's kind of like what happens in Star Wars.
Well, I'm glad you actually brought that up, because before I forget it, one of the points that I actually wanted to make as soon as I was done watching the last episode, it was something that I actually saw later on in another, because, you know, a lot of times I'll watch these things and then I'll watch a bunch of other reviews. I'll watch like Easter egg shows and stuff like that, you know, just to get kind of a big, you know, in case I missed anything and I want to bring out to everybody. But one thing that I noticed, turns out a lot of other reviewers noticed it too, being that now we have the full 2 seasons, right? Like, this is it. There's not going to be a season 3. So pretty much we now have the entire story. There's no one person, like every character in this show, season 1 and 2, everybody from Andy Serkis's character, you know, in the prison, from some of the, you know, people, or even what's the guy's name? They played his little like manifesto recording or whatever that Paragas was listening to before he shot himself.
Oh.
But he was that guy in season 1 that kept, you know, was like kind of like recording and, you know, writing all this stuff down and all that.
Mm-hmm.
All these guys that, no matter how major they were or minor they were, everybody played a part in the formation of the rebellion and the success of all these missions. That, of course, culminates in Rogue One, where they get the Death Star plans to Leia. Right? So, like, everybody actually played a part in it. There was no one, like, really big hero. And that is super sophisticated writing.
Yeah.
All right.
Because you have to make them matter.
Yes.
For what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, not only that, but you also have to make it, you can't make it so it's shoehorned, which is something that Filoni does a lot. Where, you know, it's like, okay, I got to get from point A to point B, so he'll just shoehorn something in the plot for that, or maybe some fan service thing. But you have to really be aware of where you're going in the story, like the big story, in order to write like that. You have to. All right, so David says Dedra and Mon Mothma deserve Oscars. Notice he must like it because he's not giving them like weird little names. They aren't DEI hires. Their ability to tell a paragraph and an expression is breathtaking. And yeah, exactly. It's like facial expressions,
man,
you know, body language. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth and richness to really all of these characters.
Depth and complexity. Like,
yeah,
I'm with you 100%, Eric. Like, one of the moments is like, we talked about it, you know, in the earlier part of the season, when Mon Mothma was, you know, basically got drunk and was dancing the night away, right?
Oh yeah, the disco orb or whatever that I love so much.
Orb, a little floating JBL speaker.
Yes, I can still picture that scene. It's so funny.
I know, right? But the thing is like that was so outside of her normal character, right? You've always saw her very poised, very graced, very, you know, just in control, and to see her just wild out like that, you're just kind of like she's at a teenage rave party, and you're just like, huh? But when you understand what she's going through, she needed an outlet some way, somehow. Dedra,
an outlet, that's for sure.
Yeah. So Dedra, like, watching her try to be the doting girlfriend, but not relinquishing who she really is. Like, she's dominant. She's a dominant person, and she has a partner that she's trying to help him assert himself more, and we start to see it. And even it comes to a point where Cyril eventually does, like, okay, you know, when he had that moment in the square of Gorman, where he's just like, all right, screw it, you know, and he's fighting Andor because he realizes, like, you know, he's targeting Dedra, and
it's still the best. Like, Andor's like, who is this guy?
You?
Why does he hate me so much?
Exactly. Like, do I know you? So that, you know, you're seeing even the moment where when Cyril and Dedra had that moment in that one hallway, and she's trying to tell her, look, it's fine. We just got to do this. We can go back home. We can live our lives. We have a lot of things waiting for us at home. Just do this. And of course, Cyril's trying to, find more information. So she just kisses him out of nowhere. And that was just so like,
see, here's the
whoa,
thing.
I'm not used to seeing Dedra show affection.
But
whether
you know
it was
what was
legitimate
great?
or not.
Well,
Huh?
this is the thing that was fantastic about this. And this just goes to show you, if you write characters well, I'm talking to you, Leslie Headland, and the rest of them, you don't have to
Right.
worry about it. You can have, like, Dedra is a great example of a very strong
Yes.
female character, but that remains feminine. They didn't make her masculine. They didn't do, she's still actually very feminine when she needs to be, but she's also very hard and very strong when she needs to be too.
She understands where she is. She understands, like, look, I'm in a room with all the boys, and I have to play like that when I'm around them.
Yep.
But
and then she
when
can
I'm
show her
not
softer
around
side,
them-
like you said.
Yeah, and then but when I'm not with him, like I want to just take that hat off and not have to worry, and just be, Dedra Meero and just kind of relax. It was
And I'll tell you another little note on her acting too. Like when you watch interviews with her, you realize how good of an actor she is, because she's like nothing like Dedra.
nothing like that. Yeah, exactly. But you could tell like certain things bother her. Like even as a woman, like you saw her softer side when that one captain came in. He's like, just understand, I understand that I'm the supervisor, but you're the trigger. Like you still have to make this call. And you can see that she's like uncomfortable. You can see she has moments of doubt where, am I really doing the right thing? I don't know about this, but I come too deep and I'm too far in. And if I don't do this, I know what could happen. So I kind of have to do it.
Yep.
But I'm uncomfortable by it.
No, that's true. All right, let me get to some of these chats here. So Universal says, that poses an interesting question like 10 minutes ago. Which movie show would be the ideal one to introduce to a first-time Star Wars viewer? I believe it would be A New Hope. What do you guys pick? I mean, I would probably go with that too, honestly. I mean, we've generally said, start out with the original trilogy, but in particular, the thing about A New Hope, which is the whole reason why Lucas released it first, it's the only Star Wars project at all that has a definitive beginning and end. Now, there are other ones that have beginning and ends, but this is like a self-contained movie. In other words, if nothing else existed except A New Hope,
yeah,
it has a satisfying conclusion. It was an entirely self-contained movie, and because of that, and because it basically gives you everything that Star Wars is: action, fantasy, sci-fi, character development, good acting, on and on it goes. That would probably be the best thing if, show them first. I don't know. You have a different idea?
No, I think I would go with A New Hope. I think A New Hope is, like you said, for those exact same reasons. I think it's very contained. It's easily digestible. You get the story of like, okay, they're looking for these plans. They hit them in the robots, as David would say. And okay, they drop them on this planet. It was sent for this guy who lives on this planet, Luke Skywalker, blah, blah, blah. Starts on his destiny. He meets these guys and on the way to save this princess. I mean, it's a perfect story. And like you said, it bookends well because there's no indication that Vader and Luke are related. You don't get that till Empire. See, that's why you can't say Empire, because now you need to know, like, okay, how did that happen?
Well, you couldn't say that anyway, because, I mean, number one, you'd be lost, right? I mean, it's very much a middle act.
Right.
I mean, you'd be like, I don't know what any of this is.
Exactly.
No, I mean, besides that, you also bring up a good point, too, is the fact that, it's a timeless story. So even beyond, Star Wars, I mean, obviously, it's the hero's journey type of thing. I mean, it's like a prototypical story.
Right.
So, yeah, for all those reasons. All right. So yeah, that would be the one that we would do. And then of course Universal says, David, I immensely enjoyed all the scenes with the following characters: Dedra, Partagas, Luthen, Cyril. I also enjoyed the TIE Avenger. Luthen's death scene done perfectly. I didn't like how they killed off Cyril. Yeah. Well, let me get to David's thing first, because Universal agrees with it, and then we can talk a little bit about that too. Even though that happened in the last batch and we did talk about it, but now that we have the whole series, it makes sense. So David says, Dedra's interrogation scene was beast mode. It reminded me of Batman and Joker scene. Yeah, actually. So much gravitas, and Dedra's a boss for threatening his mama and acting like nothing happened. Well, the other thing that I actually like, specifically from this episode, and then we can talk about Cyril's death too. I really like Krennic interrogating Dedra.
Yes.
And here's something that's interesting. I was watching some interviews because there's like on YouTube. I haven't watched them all. I want to see the next one I want to watch is Ben Mendelsohn and Denise Go actually do an interview together. So that should be fun. But there was another one because it was usually her and the guy that played Cyril. They were the ones that were paired up for the interviews. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came out when he like put his finger on her head, that wasn't scripted, and she did not expect that. So that reaction that she had
was legit.
Yeah, she said like that was an honest reaction because that wasn't scripted. He never discussed he was going to do that with me. So when he just like put his finger, and it was kind of like a hard landing. It was like she was just like, whoa, and she might have been a little bit concerned. But Krennic, like as beastly as and you could tell how he was in Rogue One, but man, he was really menacing in this one. Like in this whole like Andor thing, ever since they introduced him, I mean, he's just been ruthless, man.
Well, he definitely has his moments where he tries to be more intimidating, but then there's other moments where he just kind of like loses it. So
got that little Kylo thing going on, actually, because he does kind of lose it sometimes.
Yeah, like in Rogue One when all those explosions were happening, he was like, "Yeah, we're under attack." He's like, do something about it. It's like, what are y'all standing around for? Like,
well, that was part of what it was with Rogue One too. Is that I think he was more menacing in this because he was still sort of on top of everything. Whereas in Rogue One, he's just starting to lose control, man. Yeah. And then of course he found out that he was basically like the Emperor, and Vader could care less about him. Tarkin was taking over his thing. You can feel that he was being pushed out, and. So, yeah, I think that's, like, he started out really, because he's walking around with those death troopers everywhere, too.
Mm-hmm.
But in Andor, this is the reason why he was arrogant and everything, because he was, like, this feared, and you could tell, too, like, a lot of these other Imperial guys, but when Krennic walks in, you're like, all right, yeah, this is a high-level dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and and I think that his character in that whole scene, he was like, say the words, say it,
Exactly.
He's like, it's 2 words, and
it's like, come on, say it.
Give you up. She's just like, what did they find? Death Star. And why? I mean, this is the way he was delivering those lines, and every time she tried to make an excuse for something, he was like, I don't know if you're just. He said you almost would have been better off as a rebel or something like. And I was just like, dang, like he was just really laying into Dedra, man. Well, couldn't do anything about it.
Can we also take a few minutes to realize that the whole reasons why the rebels got the Death Star plans in the first place was because somebody accidentally sent out information they weren't supposed to?
Right.
It was an accidental email, basically. Like, Dedra wasn't supposed to. She just, and of course she didn't report it. And there was the whole, okay, the dominoes fall, right? But it's just, you gotta wonder who sent it in the first place. Like,
it was kind of like,
was it a calculated thing
with the whole Doge thing?
Well, sure, yeah, that like that's like the war like the tacking around or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is what it reminded me of.
yeah, exactly.
Where on the signal thing. But I mean, what's funny about it though was like you almost wonder, was it? And I actually think that it should be accidental. Like I don't think it should be like some rebel, spy or somebody put this whole thing in motion. I think it would be great because, one of the things that they've done brilliantly, I think, in Andor is they've showed us the large bureaucracy and all the issues that you get with that. Because in the movies and everything, because you're dealing with the big picture, you're basically seeing that everything's coming from either some of the Moffs, Admiral, Vader, the Emperor. It's a very high level thing, right? Where now you're seeing, and this is what I think Andor does so brilliantly, is it shows you the complexity of how the Empire is running all these systems.
Well, yeah, I mean, and even in that whole moment, it's like it really most of it was not even Dedra's fault because,
Right. I mean,
like you
well,
said, it
except
was
for
an
the fact
accidental
that she
leak
did,
from
yeah,
somebody.
but
Somebody sent the email that wasn't supposed to go to her, and then okay, she opened it. Of course, out of curiosity, she's like, okay, what the heck is this? But she doesn't. She's not aware that an actual spy has her certifications to actually
right.
get into her account,
Yeah.
and he's reading it. So it's just like, wait a minute.
Well, but if she had, like Krennic said, if she had reported it, well, then they could have seen that, okay, then it would have actually cleared her. But again, I mean, I don't think, one of the things that, and Cyril eventually got to this point too, she started thinking, because if you remember back to season 1, the way that she started thinking that she was so high up and so good and effective at her job that nothing was really going to happen to her. That's what made that whole scene when she ends up in the exact same prison as Andor was in. And then she starts crying. It's like, yeah, I mean, and now you're being victimized by the very empire that you swore to serve. And now you see how they treat people, It's like, well, I think she just didn't, I don't think she reported it because she was just kind of like, well, why? Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm. And she found out very quickly that wasn't the case.
So Cyril's death, though.
Yeah.
I enjoy. I mean, I don't say enjoy, but I knew something was going to have to change. I knew either Dedra was going to have to die, or Cyril was going to have to die, because I feel like somebody was going to need a push. The only thing I'm upset about is that we didn't see how that affected Dedra, like in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, and again, this is one of those things that you see a lot where you don't necessarily like something, but if you really stop and think about the story, it's a necessary thing. And I mean, I wish that we could have seen more of the Dedra and Cyril thing. Like I said, if they did like a WandaVision style like spin-off sitcom with those two, I would be tuning in every week. Because they're just such a delightful yet awkward couple. And
like Gomez and Morticia.
Yeah, and they're both in the Empire too. I mean, it just, I don't know. There's a lot of stories there. I could see a lot of maybe a novel, right? Or if they did like Cyril and Dedra, a Star Wars story, I would probably go see that, honestly. But you have to remember, you have to put his death in the context of his character development. You have to remember that he's a guy that wanted to rise in the Empire so bad, and he was such a true believer. Like, this is a guy that really drank the Kool-Aid. He wasn't drinking it, he was making it at this point.
Yep.
And what happened was he realized very quickly that he was played. He was played by the very organization that he served so unswerving loyally. I mean, he was so unswervingly loyal to these guys, and he realized it. And he didn't have to die. Remember, he was protected. He could have stayed in that building. He chose to jump out and do that because, and how conflicted he was and how emotional his fight with Andor was, because he was basically taking out the anger on Andor, because Andor was the whole thing that got him into this mess in his
in the first
mind.
place.
Right, because he was seeking Andor.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, that whole realization, I think, is just, that was just amazing. Now, David says, Dedra is one of the best fully developed, complex, likable, strong, in a non-feminist way characters ever in any show or movie. Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely I would say that she's, one of the examples of amazing writing. I mean, I could point
You
to
know
a
who I would
lot.
have loved? I would have loved to see her as Captain Phasma.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because there's actually a lot of theories out there that say that she basically got out and became Captain Phasma. And of course, there's a similarity between Gwendolyn, what was her
Christy.
name? Yeah, Christy, and her. They have kind of a similar vibe.
Yeah.
So
Just
you could
Gwendolyn is taller
actually
and
make that.
bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you could sort of sell that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, obviously Gwendolyn's like a behemoth compared to but but there is that you can make that connection. Universal says, we see how it affects Dedra as she is crying in her detention cell. Why Dedra told the officer all the details doesn't make sense, because that could have been the way she got out with that info. Is he talking
Yeah,
about
I think
Krennic?
she realized that she probably wasn't. I think once again, she's always still trying to prove her loyalty. And she was trying to prove, like, look, I really don't have anything to lose at this point.
Yeah.
And she's like, what would I do? I'm probably gonna do this. And it just once again shows like how good she was at her job. She was totally right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, no one will believe her because of what they believed her to be. It was a traitor.
Well, and that's it. I don't honestly think that it was even conceivable to her that people could see her in that light because of just how loyal she was.
Right.
It's sort of the same thing with Cyril, really. Cyril can't believe that the people that he loves so much, and he finally got this authority and everything, and he
Mm-hmm.
thought he was there, and then he found out, and he found out quickly. It wasn't gradually. So I think that, yeah, it was crazy. Now, Ted says, I just finished Rogue One again tonight. The biggest change for me post-Andor is that now I see Cassian as the star of the movie. Well, actually, the interesting thing about that is that, right, I guess, yeah, it was supposed to be like Jen Erso's story, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
She's supposed to be the lead or whatever. I don't know. I always saw Cassian as a Han Solo to Jin's Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously you could see where the focal point was, but I think a lot of it, though, I'll tell you what line that I remember from Rogue One that will definitely change for me now is when he said, what was it he's saying when he was like yelling at Jin and he was like talking about how he lost. What was the line now?
Oh, you talking about when they were on Edu?
Yeah, and I mean, Jin started like crying to him about something, and he was like, I lost everything, or
Yeah.
I gave up or you don't know what loss is, or something to that effect. I think now we could see a lot more of that, right? Especially
because
in light of
we
this
still
Bix
haven't
thing.
addressed the fact that Bix left. Like, she just abandoned him.
Yeah.
She basically like, look, I can't. And she did it for a very noble reasons. Like, you can't focus and be the leader you need to be if you're constantly worrying about me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to remove myself from the equation so you can focus on doing what you were born to do, basically.
And another thing, this pops up in some of the fan stuff, and it's just so stupid. It's like, no, the baby is not Poe. Let's everybody, put your man panties on and stop trying to make everybody that goes on screen related. Yes, Poe would be age appropriate for like when this little kid was born over here, but it's not.
Well,
all right.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to get to some more of these chats. You guys, something More
Oh,
to
go
say,
ahead.
have you?
Yeah. Well, let's hit the chats first.
All right, we'll get the chats first. David says, I love when Dedra's man got pissed and went off on her. And her acting when he choked her was great. She was proud, turned on, and terrified all at once. She portrayed it masterfully. Well, actually,
That's true.
It is, but not. I also don't. I think it goes beyond what might be obvious there, right? Because a lot of times, I think you might think of, when he let her go, and she was just like, "Look, you're not thinking of the big picture," and she was just almost acting like it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that is because she understood, like, okay, this is just, I get it, you're emotional or whatever. She didn't really take it personally. Being an Imperial officer, you use tactics like that. It's nothing personal. So, I mean, that's why it didn't even phase her. And Ted, of course, and Universal agree with David. And then Universal says, well, it's well written and well acted. Denise Go is a newfound star. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that I hope. I'm not really sure what she's been in. I recognized her. Like, first I recognized the name when they announced the cast, and then I recognized her when I saw her, but I don't know what else I've seen her in, though. But absolutely. I think that she's. I mean, I sincerely hope that we see more of her, and hey, look, they didn't kill her off. Nope. Now, I do wonder some things, like, I think in a lot of ways, another scene that's going to be very, very bittersweet, even more so now that you've seen this, is, when Andor is hugging Jyn at the end, when they're about to be blown up on Scarif.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just realize everything this poor guy has been through,
Yep.
Same thing with K2SO's death. Which, of course, addressing that, I mean, man.
Well, that's also, like, even the death of Luthen, like, the fact that Kayla had to go in and sneak. I mean, kudos to her, man. That whole scene with her, like, sneaking into the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And finishing the job. And then she had her moment where she's, like, looking, and she takes the tears, and she takes them out life support. Like, she's like, this is what you would have wanted me to do. And two is just like, I have to keep your dream to ensure that your dream continues. Like, I have to do this. And I loved how the fact that they all thought, was like, okay, well, it has to be like a team of these guys in there, because how did they? She's like, there's like, no, it's only one person, and it's like a chick. Like, really? But once again, like, that's what I'm saying, showing strong female characters. You can do it without, like David said, without being over the top, without having this whole feminist, overtone to it.
Well, the problem isn't even, it's not a feminist thing. What the problem is, what Kathleen Kennedy and a lot of these people have done. Now, of course, I almost have to give her a free pass, because Tony Gilroy's out there saying that without her, a lot of Andor would never have happened. But that aside,
you have to thank the person who pays your checks. I get
it. Yeah, exactly. Like, maybe it's because she's the studio head, right?
Right.
But the problem with a lot of these characters, and it's not just in Star Wars, but it's been one of the biggest problems in Star Wars. It's not so much the feminist thing. It's the fact that they're making these women masculine. Yeah. That's what it is. They're like stripping all the femininity out of them and making them more masculine. And this is one of the ways that this show has actually succeeded, is that you're getting strong female characters that are still feminine. And I don't mean like, soft and cuddly and nurturing and all that. I mean just feminine, like, women.
Yeah.
They're not trying to make them like quasi-male characters, which is what you get when you get some of these other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get the, like a lot of the problems with Rey. I mean, Rey wasn't necessarily she wasn't necessarily masculine, but the problem is that everything just, came so easy to her. The whole Mary Sue problem, where there's no struggle. I mean, it got to the point where you're watching The Rise of Skywalker, and yeah, I mean, it was fast-paced and it was a fun movie, but there was like literally no tension. It's just, oh, look, a dagger. I mean, never mind that Luke and Lando had been looking for that thing for like 10 years, and they just happen to fall in a hole and find it. It's like, really? Is there going to be no challenges or obstacles or, like anything in this movie? But with Andor, you get that, and you get the nuances. Like you said, the writing. I mean, the whole like hospital scene where she has to break in and then, eventually pull him off life support. Or when they go to the apartment where Cassian and that other guy go to the apartment and K2SO eventually has to like come to their rescue. There was a lot of tension.
Yeah, well,
and here, I'll say this, and this is the thing that, before I get to this chat, this is the thing that really shows you how good this writing and execution is. We all know Andor's going to get out, right? We know he's going to survive because he's in Rogue One. There's no mystery there. Yet, you look at that whole apartment scene where those guys were storming it, you were concerned. You're like, oh man, how's Andor going to get out? I mean, to be able to do that on a character that survives and yet create tension, amazing.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And by the way, that's probably, in the last episode I said, man, it's too bad they didn't bring K2SO in earlier and all that other stuff because, it's just so amazing. But then I started thinking about it when I was watching the episodes this week. I mean, K2SO is like a super weapon. It's like, if you had brought him in any earlier, then there wouldn't have been, like, Cassian wouldn't have had any issues. He could have gone anywhere he wanted to. Because K2 would have just started, like, bashing everybody, throwing them around. That whole thing where he used the human shield.
Man,
where he's holding
awesome.
that. Oh, man, that was just, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Being that it is a discussion show with our audience, Universal said, she mostly has worked in theater and has many of her success and awards won from theater. Okay, that makes sense. And that also makes sense why she's so good. Because people that come from a more theatrical background, their acting tends to be at a higher level.
Yeah.
David said Andor's death was tantamount to Wolverine's death in Logan. Their embrace at the end was a paradox of emotion, empathy, a nod at romance, though it wasn't, and two heroes' deaths. Yeah, I mean, when they, they kind of knew it was over.
Yeah.
And they accomplished their mission, but they weren't going to be around to see it. And it was just, I mean, in that moment, yeah, it's everything that you said it was. I mean, the ending of Rogue One, I have to admit, I thought at least a couple of those guys were going to get out. I remember when we first saw it, and it's just like, dang.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess they're going to take care of the whole, hey, none of these guys appear in episode 4. It was like downright genocidal there at the end, but,
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that they kept mentioning, like, in these last few episodes, they mentioned things like Scarif and Edu.
Yep.
So, like, they're making that connection when Kendall Krennic is talking. I love that whole, like, going back to the whole Luthen and Dedra conversation as they're, like, circling each other in this whole antique store. The fact that she's like, I have a relic, and there's a Starfinder. Or a Wayfinder. I think that's what it was. And it's like, oh, a little sequel nod. Okay. That was cool. But the fact that, like he already kind of knew, he already kind of started destroying evidence,
Yeah, well, he knew it was over. I also liked that, she kind of picked on his wig a little bit.
Oh yeah. Picked on the wig. Even when they were trying to like salvage all the stuff that was in there, and that one forensics lady was just like, wow, this is like really impressive. I mean, like she was all like marveling at it in front of her superiors, and they're like, are you really just complimenting our enemies right now? And they're kind of like, well, yeah, it's kind of, they've been using the Imperial thing all this time and we didn't catch it. I mean, it's kind of creative. Like, okay, yeah, you can fan out about this later. Fix this because we have a real problem on our hands. So it was just things like that I just really enjoyed. Those little nuggets. Krennic, again, his whole interrogation on Dedra was just like, wow. That was just like David said, that was almost like one of those Joker moments with Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it. Man. Um, oh. Um, the Princess Leia style message from Marva. That was cool.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
else?
there was what I liked was a lot of cool Easter eggs that you found in this.
Yeah.
Like another scene that jumped out at me was Artigas. Like his
Man.
whole, I mean, when he was listening to that message, I wish I can remember that dude's name from season 1. But when he was listening to that journal entry or whatever it was, manifesto
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, it was I mean, you could just tell it was weird because in a way it almost felt like the unraveling of the Republic in episode 3. But you're getting a microcosm of it because what it essentially is, and it was really driven home in that scene, is the fact that you understand that the Empire failed at just stamping out this rebellion before it became like a bigger organization, right? Because up until now, it had been a bunch of like terrorist cells, basically. Little factions here and there, that were like loosely coordinated. But then you realize, like, it's too late. And I mean, the one thing that I was trying to figure out, I think is just because of that he killed himself. But why did he? I mean, obviously he was going to be brought before somebody they're like, oh, they're ready to see you now.
Yeah, he was afraid of because he was gonna go before Vader and the Emperor.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, then
That's why he
absolutely.
was just like,
It's
if
like,
you don't
all
mind,
right.
can I have a moment to myself?
Yeah.
And the guy
like-
knew exactly what was going on. He was like, sure. So as he stepped out, and he heard the muffled blaster fire. And
oh, when
just
he
like,
held his hand up.
like, no, don't even.
Yeah.
He already,
Well, that
it
makes
was just-
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If it was Vader and the Emperor, yeah, then that's totally why the guy's like, don't even go in there, man. I don't blame
Because
him.
he knew he's like, yeah, I have, because he's kind of like right under Krennic. So it was kind of like, because I think he
was like an
even
administrator
he made it
of
mention
like
I
some.
met with the Emperor earlier today or something like that. Because in one of the meetings they were talking about it, and I was just like, wow.
Well, yeah,
know.
because his whole position or something was like some sort of like, I don't know. I always
He's like the head of ISB, I think,
was it?
or one of the main supervisors of ISB. Because remember, like when they were doing that whole tactical thing, like he was the guy. He was basically running comms because he was like, okay, I need all this information when they were
Right.
trying to go into that into the safe house.
Yeah.
He was the one who was kind of coordinating all that, and he was going to be held responsible because he lost them. So it was just like,
yeah. I mean, that's definitely
that was the thing. It's like, okay, we had these guys in there, and you lost them, and these guys are aware of what the Death Star is now. We're pretty much certain that they are, and even the fact that even that whole meet. That's another part I wanted to bring up. The whole when Cassian came back, because they were all like yelling at him for leaving and breaking protocol, and that whole situation when when he tried to land and they sent those X-wings out to greet him, like, all right,
yeah.
we don't know if you're hostile or not, and of course K2SO was making all these jokes and kind of like sarcastic remarks, which I thought that was really awesome. But yeah, when he was trying to explain to them, like, look, they're building this weapon, this energy project has been a sham from the start. This is what they're really trying to do. Now, well, what is the weapon? Well, I don't know, but we need to really look at it. And now you have all the heads of the rebellion trying to, like, okay, some get it, others don't. And I understand why. And I'm like, well, we can't expose ourselves too much because we're still in our infancy. Because even then, like, they still weren't fully the rebellion yet. Because Rogue One hasn't even taken place.
Right, and of course, to that effect, we get a little bit more of the background on how Saw Gerrera ended up on the outs with them too, because he wasn't going to join up with them. It's like, look, you're attacking these Imperial, you're doing this all wrong, and it's like, well, that's what I'm going to do.
What you fought as good as you lie. It's like, dang.
And of course, we get to see him on Jeddah, and now he looks more like what we saw him in Rogue One with his armor and all that stuff, and so that part was cool. But the thing that concerned me, and I mean, nobody's really brought it up, so I guess maybe it didn't, but just in the way they were talking about it, it almost seemed like they were retconning things a little bit, because if I remember watching Rogue One, and of course Jyn tried to bring the whole news of the Death Star to them, and they had that big meeting. They really did walk a fine line in almost violating their own canon, because obviously in Rogue One, this is supposed to be like the first time they even ever heard of this super weapon. Where obviously now in Andor, not really, because Andor tried to tell them about it. But the way that they can solve that, obviously, is, they basically blew off Cassian's thing. And then even in the big meeting, they were trying to say, well, we can't trust her because, she was like Galen Erso's daughter. So, they were dismissing her. So I guess you can hide behind that. But that was really close, though.
Yeah.
And that was really a close violation.
Close. And but I think it because of how it ends, they finally, because they got remember Cassian was grounded.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you can't leave. But then when they saw that some information had come in, like, no, I think this thing is a little bit more real. Because that's when the whole, I think the Bothan spies or whatever.
No, this is another thing that drives me insane, because a lot of people keep getting this mixed up. It drives me nuts as a longtime Star Wars fan. And I'm glad to see that other YouTubers have jumped out at this, because a lot of fans were like, oh, what about the Bothan spies? The Bothan spies were for the second Death Star. That was the speech in Return of the Jedi. Many Bothans have died to give us these plans. The Bothans were never in A New Hope. It was not right. Death Star 1. It was Death Star 2.
Star 2. Yeah, okay. I remember, because I knew, of course, obviously it's the Death Star.
Oh, dude, everybody has been trying to complain about that. Oh, where's the Bothan spies? It's like, you idiots. David says, Season 2 was dang near perfect. All the deaths were meaningful. There was no wasted screen time, no agenda. The secret of the Death Star was a huge shock. Plot twist to me, very well done. And then Universal says, I agree with most of that. Most of what?
I believe what David maybe been saying. I don't know.
Possibly David's thing. I would imagine David's comments been sitting there for a while. Yep. He says, yep, because Universal also comes in. Bothan Spies is in Return of the Jedi. Yeah, that's the thing that everybody... It's funny because a lot of people were talking about that. And it's like, no, that's the second Death Star, not the first one. But it's funny because obviously they were mining a lot of stuff for that second Death Star. Because if you think about it, comparatively speaking, they had the thing up, fairly farther along, Now, of course, in the EU, there was like... I don't remember if they had any. No, the Sun Crusher was one of the main ones, but they had. It was a little different how they handled it in the EU. There was like this special. It wasn't the Sienna shipyard or anything like that, but there was like a space where Palpatine was like trying to manufacture these Death Stars. So they were more or less, because obviously the EU started in 91. And, Return of the Jedi was 83. They were trying to explain how Death Star 2 was so far along, only a few years after Death Star 1, right? Like, all right, guys, it supposedly took you like 30 years to build this thing. How do you have one this quick? I mean, okay, granted, maybe hey, we got this down, we can build it faster, but not that much faster.
Well, I think they were building them both at the same time.
They were, and that's the key. So basically, the EU explained it where they were, they're about to try to have a bunch of these things, right? But they were only getting their second one. But Disney canon, basically what we're seeing here a little bit in Andor, they're alluding to it. There was some stuff like that in Catalyst 2 where they were talking about how, they were pretty much already starting the construction of the second. But, I digress. All right. Oh, this is funny. So Ted basically is, instead of many Bothans, Manny Bothans was just one dude. His story will be the next one. That would be hilarious. Manny Bothans was this guy. Yeah, he died while...
Yeah.
Manny Bothans, a Star Wars story. Sadly, I would still watch it.
Of course.
Hey, but at least, before this show and probably even a little after, we started watching, well, you had watched it, but I finally got to start watching Tales of the Underground again, like I've watched it before.
Underworld.
What did I say?
Underground.
Oh. I guess I didn't say undergarments.
Well.
Tales of the Undergarment.
Well.
Tales
on a
of
different,
the under
platform, shall we say.
Exactly. Exactly, that would be it. The Asajj Ventress OnlyFans.
Yeah.
But I am glad, by the way, even though we haven't, I don't know, maybe we'll do a show on it where we just talk about all the episodes. I mean, one of the things so far, watching the first 2 or 3 or whatever, they do seem to be connected. I like the fact that they did that with Tales of the Jedi. They had a few outliers, but they did have these like 3 or 4 like episode story arcs. And then I think Tales of the Empire was the same way. Mm-hmm. They did like the first half or something was what was her name? It's the Imperial chick.
Yes, it's Morgan Elsbeth.
Yes. I thought that was the second half. Well, one half was Morgan Elsbeth, but the second half, guys, help us out. Tales of the Empire was divided into 2 sections. One was Morgan Elsbeth's story, and the other one was someone else. It was like some...
Was it Grievous?
No. Oh, jeez. I'm acting like I don't have my iPad with a keyboard in front of me. I could just look it up. Unless somebody wants to type it in.
I got it.
You got it? All right.
Well.
So let's see. Tales of the Empire. Somewhere. Barisafi.
Barisafi.
Yes. Barisafi. So I like the way they did that. But the way they're doing Tales of the Underworld, I like too. So we might do a show, I don't know, maybe the next show, where we could talk about that a little bit. But like I said before, man, it's going to be really tough now to see something like Ahsoka season 1, After witnessing this,
getting better.
Is it bad that I have my doubts?
I think that's a legitimate. I think that's a legitimate.
Well, the problem is, my theory is that I just don't think that we're gonna get Star Wars this good again.
Well, hopefully they've learned, and maybe they'll have Tony Gilroy come in and help punch things up or look at scripts, or
That's true. I mean, he wasn't actually the original guy in Rogue One. Gareth Edwards was. And actually, Gareth Edwards did most of the movie. Gilroy came in, directed some scenes, punched some stuff up, improved it. I honestly think that that's one of the reasons why, like, 80% of the first trailer wasn't even in the film.
Right.
Which is always funny. But yeah, I mean, again, you guys could give us your thoughts on Andor Season 2, or if you just want to keep it contained to these episodes, that's fine too. Look, David liked it. End of story.
Right. It's a dub.
Yeah, he's singing their praises now. You know, given that he liked it so much, it's almost too bad that he wasn't with us from the beginning of these reviews.
Right.
Then we could have enjoyed it more. Because remember, last season we did it episode by episode, except for like the premiere when they did the first 3. But they actually released it episode by episode every week. So we can only do 1. So that was a painful, painful battle. But hey, in probably just a few short months, we're going to have Visions Season 3. Yeah. There you go.
We'll see.
Hey, I mean, you did like Season 2 better than you liked Season 1.
Indeed.
Even some episodes you were like, okay, these are actually good. Not even grading on a curve. They were good episodes.
Right.
Season 1, it was good grading on a curve. So we'll have to see. But what did you guys think of? You could give us, what did you think of episodes 10 through 12? What did you think of Andor Season 2 as a whole? You guys know the drill. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, the algorithm really likes it. We want to welcome all of our new subscribers. And I don't know, maybe that's what we'll do next week. Maybe we'll take Tales of the Underworld, knock that out. Because we did, in all fairness, we did do the other 2 Tales of. We did review those. Now, I don't know if we necessarily have to do it like by week again. I mean, that might be a little tedious, but we could just give like an overall, hey, you know, each one of those things is like, I don't know, 15, 16 minutes. So I think we could give a really nice little review on all those. So we'll plan on doing this. All right, David says, y'all should mark this in your calendar because it's rare that I take an L. I'm usually schooling you both. Oh, speaking of sci-fi fantasy, Daryl takes L's all the time. He's used to it. That's a little bit of the Andor Season 1 dialogue that I remember. See? It couldn't just let it go and all be nice. All right, well, it's all right.
And as always, he eventually sees it my way in the end. So
yeah,
that's
I mean,
all that
hey,
matters.
it's all that matters.
You know, all that matters.
All right, cool. Well, hopefully you guys have a good rest of your week. We'll be live once again next week where we'll apparently talk about Tales of the Underworld. Look at us, producing live in front of your naked, steaming eyes. All right, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.